In this lesson, we'll be discussing scientific notation. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to express numbers in scientific and standard notation and find quotients and products of numbers expressed in scientific notation. So standard versus scientific. Standard is when the decimal tells us the place value. So in that one, because of where the decimal is, I can tell that it's $1 or 10 cents. With scientific, there's only one number behind the decimal, always. And it's the times 10 to the 5th that tells you how big it is. A 24.5 times 10 to the 4th is not in scientific notation. It can only be one number in front of the decimal. So to translate from scientific to standard, positive exponents, you move the decimal to the right. So for example, 3.4 times 10 to the 5th, we move that decimal 5 places to the right. If it's a negative exponent, we move to the left. So 3.4 times 10 to the negative 2nd is 0.034. So to translate from standard to scientific, we move the decimal left for positive. So 332 becomes 3.32 times 10 to the 2nd because I moved the decimal 2 places. If it's negative, we go to the right. So my 0.028, I move it over 2 places, and it becomes 2.8 times 10 to the negative 2. So when you multiply and divide with scientific notation, first you take care of the constant, so multiply or divide your constant, and then when you multiply your times 10 part, you add the exponent. If you're dividing, you subtract, just like we do with our monomials. So 1.8 times 10 to the 4th times 2.6 times 10 to the negative 5th. First we're going to multiply the 1.8 and 2.6, and that gets us 4.68. And then 10 to the 4th times 10 to the negative 5th, when you multiply, you add the exponents, so 10 to the negative 1. If we're dividing, first we'll take the 2.6 divided by 1.8, and that's 1.44. And then 10 to the 4th minus a negative 5 is 10 to the 9th. So if we're evaluating 10 to the negative 3rd, we have to make that a reciprocal. So it's 1 over 10 to the 3rd, which is 0.001 or 1 thousandths. Negative 2 to the power of negative 3 becomes 1 over negative 2 to the positive 3, and negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 8. Then I have 10 to the 3rd times 10 to the negative 3rd. When you multiply, you add. So 3 and negative 3 becomes 0. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. I'm going to change this to standard notation, which means I'm going to move it the decimal 5 places, and I get 135,000. 2.7 times 10 to the negative 3rd means I move the decimal place 3 places to the left, and I get 0.0027. And negative 2.01 times 10 to the 4th means I go 4 places to the right. If I'm going to go to scientific notation, that decimal has to go right behind the 7, which means I've moved it 3 places. So it's 7.09 times 10 to the negative 3rd. This one is 1.55 times 10 to the 8th. And you'll notice that C is not in scientific notation because there's no decimal after the 2. So when I change it to the decimal after the 2, it would be times 10 to the 4th. So by evaluating this, remember, first thing I'm going to do is multiply the coefficients, and then I'll add the exponents on the times 10 portion. So that gets me 17.1 times 10 to the 8th, which is not in scientific notation. So I need to move it over. So it's 1.71 times 10 to the 9th, which is 1,710,000. This one I'm going to start by dividing those coefficients. I get 0.23 times 10 to the negative 5th, because negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5, but that's not in scientific notation. So when I move it to 2.3 times 10 to the negative 6th, which is 0.0000023. All right, students at Salt Lake Community College pay 1.585 times 10 to the 4th dollars for tuition, and students at George Washington pay 4.573 times 10 to the 5th. about how many times greater is the tuition at George Washington. So we're going to divide those two numbers, and when we divide, we'll do the coefficients or the constants first, which is 2.885 times 10, and I've got the 5 minus 4, which is 1. So is this one in standard notation or scientific? So this is in scientific, especially with the 5.1, and this one is in standard.